Hi girls. We're gonna have a casual chat today because I am knackered, but it is officially Valentine's Day in 40 minutes, and I feel compelled to speak to you about Love is Blind seasons 4 and 5 before the new season comes out tomorrow. I have so much to say, and I don't know how long it's going to take, so we need to get straight into it. Love is Blind season 4. I don't even know what to say about it. A notable cast. So I'm going to say this right off the bat. Tiffany and Brett, one of those couples who just hit it off right from the start and pretty much had no trouble the entire way through. A couple of the things that Tiff said in the beginning, though, kind of struck a chord with me, and I wanted to open it up for discussion with the class. But Tiff first comes on and she says that she thinks that it's weird that she hasn't found someone at her age. And Bro is 35. I just really don't think that that's particularly old. In fact, I think that that's maybe exactly the right time to be thinking about settling down, maybe. But only if you're ready for that kind of thing. I don't think that we should be setting an age limit on milestones like that. It's like that come to everyone individually. It's like going to school or something like that, right? Tiff also said that she wouldn't have. No, I think the way that she phrases it is that she would have judged Brett before because he didn't have a college degree. And I also thought that was pretty wild. Like, maybe it's different in America, but it just doesn't really matter that much to me. And I don't think it would matter to a lot of people that I know. But Tiff seems like a really good person, and her and Brett were obviously a really good couple who experienced no drama whatsoever. So honestly, I have nothing bad to say about either of them. Next up is Micah. I didn't know whether I was going to like Micah or not at first because she introduced herself as an empath, and that is a red flag for anyone, I'm sure. It's a big meme nowadays that anyone who introduces himself as an empath is usually the worst fucking person on earth. And it kind of seemed like Micah was gonna be that guy. Next is Paul. Paul is a Libra, and that is the best way that I can describe him. He's kind of weird, but he's got this quiet kind of riz, bro, that I kind of like and I kind of vibe with. Chelsea seems really cool and really chill. She's not a person who is ruffled easily, and she seems like she'd be a really good friend. Kwame, I can't get a good read on him in all honesty, and I have things to say about him, but we'll get into them later. Irina, Micah's best friend in the pods. So she introduces herself by talking about the fact that she used to have acne and she used to worry that nobody would ever find her attractive because of the acne, and then after that acne scars or whatever. So she talks about how this is something that's taught her that it's not your outside appearance that matters, but what's on the inside. And that's very Disney Channel of her. I don't think that her journey on the show really followed up this intention that she had here in this original interview somehow. Next up is Zach. Zach is also fucking weird, but like, there's something about him, bro. He just grows on you throughout the show. He grew on me anyway. Bliss is like a really nice girl, and I feel like she has a lot of grace and she's very nice to the people around her, but I don't think she has a lot of that grace and that patience for people who aren't as involved as she is. She and Irina essentially get into a love triangle with Zach, right? And there are a lot of situations where, even though Irina is being a bitch, I feel like Bliss kind of exacerbates the situation a little bit by being so standoffish towards her instead of, taking the high ground and trying to be the better person and communicate cordially. Then there's Jackie, who we'll get plenty into later, who's speaking to two boys. Marshall, also a Libra, I'm pretty sure, likes to write poetry, very sensitive, and Josh, who is the complete opposite, essentially, and just like a bit of an alpha chad, to put it simply. So we enter into the pods. Paul is kind of speaking to this girl called Amber, and he's also speaking to Micah, and he has this conversation with Amber about would you ever cheat in a relationship, and Amber admits that she has cheated in a relationship before, and she explains like her reasons behind it, not like justifications, but just like why she thinks the relationship came to that point. And Paul is kind of put off by it, and obviously I can see why. Like, it is off-putting to find out that somebody you're potentially going to be marrying has cheated on someone before. I think that Amber does raise a good point, right? When she says that cheating happens for a reason. Obviously, it's not the right thing to do, but obviously, good people in happy relationships just don't go out there and cheat on their partners, right? So something has to be going on beneath the surface where they feel unsatisfied or whatever, and that is, whether we like it or not, a reason why this happened. And obviously, this person chose wrong. But does it necessarily mean that they would choose wrong again in a different situation, in a completely different relationship that has completely different everything going on? You know what I mean? In no way am I advocating for cheaters, but I feel like a lot of these people on this show have this like really rigid ideology when it comes to cheating, and it's like once a cheater, always a cheater. And we will get more into that idea later, but it came up here, and I just thought that Amber did raise a good point in the fact that she said, yeah, it might not be an explanation, it might not be a justification for why I did it, but there were reasons behind it, right? Chelsea and Kwame are into each other, and so they talk about. God, it's so stupid. Do you like have sex or do you like make love? And it's like, I personally hate this distinction, okay? I feel like we just need to pack it in immediately because there's no difference. I don't understand, like, the euphemisms of each other, right? And I feel like this separation is this new modern thing. For some reason, we like to separate sex from love nowadays. I don't know. I don't think there is a distinct difference. I'm not going to get into the philosophical reasons why, okay? Because I feel like sex is a very personal thing and everybody views it in a different light, and I would not like to impose my opinions about that onto anybody else, really. There is something to be said about the fact that we want to make this separation. Sex can just be this meaningless thing now. It has to have this completely different language when we talk about doing it with somebody that we love, right? And I just don't get it. Sex is, like I said, an intimate thing. It's an intimate act. The people that you choose to do that with, that's intimate. Well, whatever the reasons, like, you don't have to be in love with them, but it is still an intimate act. It's just silly. It's silly, this distinction. And I feel like there's too much of an emphasis on this separation of sex, this making of sex into this fucking corporate business transaction, bro. I don't like it. Anyway, then Kwame goes on to say of Chelsea in his little interview, I've never had someone so into me. And I think that is so indicative of how this relationship goes, right? Because the entire time Kwame is also into Micah, and it kind of appears like he is really a lot more into Micah than he is into Chelsea, and he kind of keeps Chelsea around in order to validate him because Micah doesn't validate him in that way. It's very appealing to have someone really fancy you or whatever, but at the end of the day, if you don't feel the same way about them, that's going to become annoying really quick. So, like I say, Kwame is also speaking to Micah, and Micah does what we are officially dubbing the Barnett bait and switch. If you remember in the first season, Barnett made Jess break it off with the other guy she was speaking to. And then sacked her off for another girl after doing that. So Micah does that to Kwame. Like, she comes in and she properly makes out like she's gonna choose Kwame because it sounds like he's gonna choose Chelsea. And then once she's got him on side and got him thinking that it's the two of them against the world, then she switches it around on him and she's like, yeah, but I want to give Paul a chance, you know, because I'm also speaking to Paul and he's like a slow burn. So I don't want to go into our relationship thinking that I should have given him a chance, you know. I think that Micah did really want Paul in this moment, but the thought that Kwame was going to break up with her was maybe a little too much for her ego. And that's not a slight on her. I think anybody would have their ego hurt by that, even if they didn't necessarily want the guy themselves, right? Getting rejected hurts. Also, Micah does strike me in the way that she can be a bit catty and bitchy in these early episodes as somebody who does feel competitive towards other women, and so maybe the thought that Kwame was going to choose this other girl over her, just the fact that she had kind of lost this guy to any other girl, that might have brought out a competitive edge in Micah. So she kind of brought out the manipulative, womanly tactics, bro. Satire. And she pulled a bait and switch. Anyway, after this, like the day after or something, she literally goes back and tells Kwame that she's gonna dump him for Paul, essentially. Kwame's reaction to getting dumped is like crazy. He basically like bottles everything up and he's like, yeah, dude, fine by me. I hope you have a great life and it's been great getting to know you. And then he just kind of storms out of the room. And I've seen a couple of people say that this was like a really healthy way to react. And it's like, bro, he literally like bottled up everything he wanted to say and went out and like cried away from everyone because he didn't want anyone to see him crying. That's not healthy. And this is the reason why after he walked away from her and after he got engaged to Chelsea, he then felt like he had to keep going back to Micah in the like holiday situation because he didn't get that closure that he felt like he needed from that final conversation. He should have hashed it out with her, got his feelings out of the way, felt like he said everything he needed to say, and then he could have let the situation go, and then he wouldn't have got into as much trouble as he did later on. I don't think hiding your emotions from someone that you've been in this budding relationship with is like a healthy reaction. I understand that trying to keep like a positive attitude towards it and try not to be like, fuck you, dude, like you're a bitch. I understand like that's not a healthy response, but he's allowed to say that he feels hurt. As long as she's not a complete sociopath, she's gonna understand that he's hurt by getting rejected for it. Like what? I want to talk about fate for a minute. Let's talk about something nice. I'm not here to tell you that fate doesn't exist, bro. I'm not gonna do that to you and I'm not gonna do that to myself. But it's so funny the things that we think of fate, like these little coincidences that basically mean nothing. And we've all done it, right? We've all romanticized our way into thinking that someone's the one because we both walk our dogs down the same path or something in a morning. Zach and Bliss, right? They both like owls. It's like it's such a common bird to like. They're considered to be wise and they're like mysterious night birds. They're cool. Owls are cool. Everyone fucking likes owls, bro. Their mums both liked a song. And it's like, it's a fairly popular song. There's a lot of sentimentality to it because Zach's mum has obviously passed away. And I'm not even dissing it, bro. Like, I also think these two were meant to be together, but I just find it really funny how romantic our little silly brains are, right? That we can convince ourselves that liking owls and our mums liking the same song means that we're meant to be together, as if there aren't a million other people in the world who probably have those exact same stipulations. Jackie. We didn't talk about Jackie a lot in the intro. That's because I wanted to talk about her here. I think that Jackie is, and this is no slight on her, very immature. She talks about how dating the boys in the pods is like being a candy shop and they're all different flavors and she wants to try them all. She doesn't really seem like a person who's ready to settle down. And, you know, she proves me right there. She's speaking to Marshall and Josh, and when she makes a decision between them, she says that she wants to go for the guy who's emotionally mature and who's sensitive and isn't like guys that she's been with before, and that is obviously Marshall. But instead of facing up and going into the pods and breaking up with Josh, like literally every other person has done, she lets Marshall do it. Like in the living quarters, she lets him go over and say, listen, Jackie's chosen me, so you can fuck off. That's the ultimate sign of maturity, right? That she doesn't even have to see him face to face, bro. She only has to speak to him through a wall, and she won't even go in there and tell him that she's chosen somebody else. The guy is fully aware that it was a love triangle situation and that it was going to be one of them. He surely has prepared himself for rejection in some way, and it's like, it's your responsibility, bro. It's not your boyfriend's responsibility to do that for you. Also interesting the reason why she chose Marshall over Josh, but we'll get into that later. Zach chooses Irina over Bliss. Obviously, Irina was being a bitch in the living quarters to the girls, but I think that she hid a lot of that from the men when she was on dates, and especially with Zach when she was with him. And he kind of saw her as an underdog. He got the vibe that Bliss didn't like her, and Bliss kind of badmouthed her a little bit. Zach does not come from money, and Bliss does. So I think he kind of saw a kinship there between him and Irina because they were kind of on a similar level that way. There was a little bit of judgment from Bliss there, and so that might be directed at him later on. You know, maybe they were just these little narratives that he was selling himself, because he really seemed to pride himself on the fact that he'd come from nothing and he really made something of himself. And I think he still probably had a little bit of insecurity about money and things like that. I think he was really kind of worried about the class divide or whatever between him and Bliss, and that's why he ended up choosing Irina. But the reveal, worst reveal ever, okay? Irina says that Zach looks like a cartoon character, and he says, I know. She's like, do you ever blink? And then like, he's really annoyed by this, like, this really triggers him. And I'm trying not to laugh because it isn't funny to, you know, make fun of somebody's appearance like that, but it's just funny as fuck, like, that he chose this girl who we all knew was the bad choice, and she immediately revealed herself at the reveal to be the worst choice ever. Like, he goes to kiss her and she gives him the cheek, bro. Like, she rejects the kiss. He should have just known from then, and he full on goes on the honeymoon with a bro, and I have no idea what this man was thinking, and I don't know why she went with him. The couples are now in real life. Kwame and Chelsea, Micah and Paul, and who else is relevant? Jackie and Marshall. So even though everybody is engaged now, there's still more competing between the girls. Like, Micah and Irina want to prove to Chelsea that Kwame is still into Micah for some reason. They want to prove that she's kind of second choice. And I don't know why it matters to them, it just does. They've got this kind of toxic friendship that makes Micah worse than she is, it seems, because when she's away from Irina late in the season, she really seems to blossom and, like, become a nice guy. But Kwame's really playing into their hands, right? Because obviously, like I said, he feels like he's not got this closure with Micah now, and so he is still interested. Whether it's just in getting that closure or something deeper than that, we don't know. It's definitely going to seem that way to his new fiance, right? Kwame and Chelsea kind of a bit of tension about when they want to have kids. Chelsea wants to rush into it straight away. I think she's a little bit older than him, so maybe she's a bit worried about her biological clock or whatever. I don't know anything about that. Kwame obviously wants to wait and spend a little bit of time together before they bring kids into the equation. I'm personally in Kwame's camp here. I understand that there are arguments in both directions, like you want to be young enough to be able to run around after your kids. I also think there's something to be said about actually building the foundation of your marriage before you introduce literal tiny people who need all of your attention into that dynamic. It just depends on the people and whether they want to be parents at the end of the day, but I feel like this should be something that you agree upon before you get married. I understand these people do not have a lot of time, but maybe that was some colour of flag, I'm not sure. So Kwame and Bliss both have parental units that aren't approving of their upcoming nuptials. Kwame's family, well, his mum basically refuses to come, and she doesn't support him in the slightest in this endeavour. Kwame takes this really hard. It makes him question whether he should even go through with it, because obviously he does want his mum at his wedding, and he does want his mum to meet his future wife, to accept her. They're both a big part of his life. He obviously wants them to get along. Zach and Irina split up, and Zach starts dating Bliss, and then he just proposes to her. I was expecting them to, like, date after this, but I wasn't expecting them to get together. That was wild, and it's wild that she said yes to me so soon after him, you know, being engaged to another girl. Anyway, she chooses him, and it's very clear that they're very, very suited to one another, but her father does not approve. He's just not very nice to Zach, but Zach can take it very well, and I kind of admire that about him. Bliss is not fazed by the fact that her dad doesn't like him. She says, this is the man that I choose, and I want you to support that. And to be fair, Dad is still around. I'm pretty sure Dad walks her down the aisle. Dad may not be enthusiastic about it, but he is supportive. I feel like it does make a difference. It does really, really make a difference. But is Kwame's reaction warranted? Like, if this is the woman that you want to marry, aren't you going to be willing to make it work whether your family approves or not? It really felt like a lot of the time in the later episodes of the show, Kwame was looking for reasons why he and Chelsea should not be wed. He was having this whole thing with Micah where it looked like he was really still interested in her and not really in his actual fiance. And then he started going on about how he would have to move if he and Chelsea got together, and he was like, I run the same route every morning, like, what am I gonna do when I move out there? And it's like, run a new route, bro. I did kind of feel like this was one of those things that he was using as an excuse, because we've seen a lot of the times throughout the show that parents aren't approving, and maybe it would be a different situation if they'd known these people for years and they were familiar with them and then you decided to get married. But I think that being on Love is Blind brings a whole new dimension to the parental disapproval. So we can't really judge them for it in this situation. If I was a parent and I really didn't approve, even if I decided not to go, like in Kwame's situation, I feel like once I realized that my child was going to go ahead with this and this was really what they wanted to do, then I'd have to go, bro. I'd have to support it. I'd have to deal with it because that's your baby, bro. Micah, in her life, the people who you have to impress are her friends. And much like Irina in the pods, her friends are bitches, bro. Well, one of her friends in particular is a bitch. I can't remember her name. She immediately doesn't like Paul. And I kind of get the vibe that she's one of those friends who's like, no one's ever going to be good enough for you. She just seems kind of a little bit put off by the fact that Paul is smart. I feel like Paul's not the kind of guy that Micah usually brings to the table. You know what I mean? It's probably scary when all your friends start getting married around you, right? And you don't know that you're going to be in that situation because it can feel like, you know, they're paired off now. They don't need friends as much because they've got this partner who's with them through everything. You can kind of feel like you're getting left behind, right? Maybe this was a reaction of fear, but this friend ends up making a scene with Paul, and Paul kind of says, well, I don't really care what you think. And Micah really takes offense to this. She thinks that Paul should really care what her friends think. I understand that it's important. I think a lot of people, their friends nowadays are their family. Family's not as big or as important of a thing as it used to be, whether that be for good or for ill. Friends, how often did you see them between like work and family and whatever else you have going on? I feel like to have a friend, not like a partner, is just not as big of a deal as family, right? Because family are very involved in like the raising of your kids and whatnot, whereas your friends are more something that you have for you on a personal level. Am I right? And I'm not saying that you can't do family stuff with your friends, but obviously you're not going to do that if your friend and your partner don't get on. It's just a fact of life, right? Like, not everybody gets on, and just because you like someone doesn't mean that your friend or your partner is going to like them as well. I don't feel like the importance of her friends' opinions are as big of a deal as Micah is making out. Paul says something interesting right before we go into the wedding sequence. He asks, is love enough? And it's interesting to me because I think a lot of people would jump at that and say, yeah, obviously it's enough, but it's fucking not. And it's such a loaded question. Maybe for some people it is, okay? Maybe there are really some true romantics out there who can get by on love alone and it can fucking sustain them on an empty stomach and whatnot. But I think a lot of us in this horrible, cruel capitalist society, we need other stuff. We need other stuff from a person. And that's not to say that we won't give as good as we get, but we can love each other and be really bad for each other as well. And that's just facts. Jackie lets Marshall dad her, and I'm not saying that this is necessarily a bad thing. Like, I'm not gonna sit out here and say that I'm a strong, independent woman every day of the week and I don't sometimes let my man tie my shoelaces or some shit, yeah? But she lets him do it all the time, like, and she does nothing in return. Like, he's constantly making her breakfast and, you know, cleaning up after her, and she just goes to work and swans back, and she's more closed off emotionally than he is, so he doesn't even get the emotional reciprocation that he needs in this relationship. I think that dynamic of a closed off person versus a very loving and affirmative person can become really exhaustive for both couples, because the closed off one feels like the affirmative one is suffocating them, but the affirmative one is just looking for that validation that you need from the other person, right? They can't be closed off all the time. Being like this way can make both parties resent each other. In the end, they end up having an argument where Jackie says that she wants a guy who's an alpha, which, if you remember, is the opposite reason why she chose Marshall in the first place. I'm not sure how much of this is like attitude and how much of this is like a sexual thing, but I don't care, because we're actually going to talk about how much of this is sexism. Why does Jackie want an alpha? Is it because we've been fucking pumped this fucking stereotype of what a man should be like so that men don't have to be emotional and face up to their feelings and become fucking feminized or whatever it is that my man Andrew Tate says? How many of these people who say that they want an alpha have ever really tried to be in a relationship with someone like Marshall, have ever really given it a chance? Because I don't feel like Jackie gave it a chance. I don't feel like she ever really truly opened up to him in the way that he did with her. She should have, if she was really hoping to pursue this relationship, this marriage. How important is sexual compatibility? I know that this probably depends on the people as well, But I really think, like, if you met someone and you got along so well, everything else was perfect, right? And the one thing where you weren't exactly on the same page, like you wanted him to be a little bit aggressive in the bedroom or whatever, and he just wasn't like that, would you really give up this perfect 10 out of 10 relationship just for a little bit of aggro sex every now and again? Could you be asked? A lot of people place a lot of emphasis on sexual compatibility when, especially at first, like, it's something that you learn about each other, right? And it's something that you explore together. It's not necessarily something that you have to be on the same page about straight away. Maybe if Jackie had given Marshall a chance, he would have tied her up and strangled her or something. I don't know. So tied her up and read her poetry. Marshall ends up calling Jackie a project, which I think was a very Libra thing to do. It was a very, very mean way of saying something that he really meant, which was that he saw potential in her and he wanted to help her reach that potential. And essentially, what is the difference, honestly, between saying that and I saw you as a project? Jackie's always running, right? Like, she ran away from Josh and she made Marshall break up with him for her. And now she runs away from Marshall. She leaves him at the suit fitting. She doesn't go to her dress fitting and he has to find out from someone else. And the way that the editing makes it look is that she goes to meet Josh. She ends up saying that she's going to be with him instead. And so she continues her cycle of being with the Alpha Chad, who is ultimately pretty disrespectful towards her. Also her engagement, but I don't feel like she was too bothered about that. She wasn't very respectful of that engagement either. So the weddings. Zach and Bliss got married. Good for them, bro. I said that I had a love-hate relationship with Micah throughout this series. I really didn't know how to feel about her. The moment when I decided I truly loved her was at Zach and Bliss's wedding. I think it was at the wedding anyway, when she was getting interviewed and she was talking about how he originally chose Irina and she just goes, delete it. I love that. I love that energy. And she's right. If the two of them want to get on and have a happy marriage, Bliss is going to have to be the kind of person who can get over that kind of thing. And fortunately, it seems like she is mature enough to do so. Zach really knows that he made a mistake, so he's going to spend the rest of his life making up for that. Kwame and Chelsea got married. Chelsea is just one of those people who, when she decides she's going to make it work, it works. And Kwame probably realised that he had a real one and he'd really fuck it up if he didn't marry her. Paul says no to Micah. He says that they both got stuck in this negative feedback loop where neither of them were willing to give affection. Really sad. It's really a sign of the times. It's one of those things where people are so scared to show their genuine emotions and their real side nowadays that sometimes love just isn't enough because you aren't willing to express it enough that the other person can overcome their own fear of expressing it. A relationship where one person is affirmative and the other person isn't can also become exhaustive. So I guess it's just about finding that person who speaks your love language or whatever, has that same level of affectionateness that you have. I'm not going to make any grand conclusions right now. We're going to move straight along to season 5. Season 5 was juicy, bro. Season 5 had a lot of twists and turns going on. The plot twists were immense. We're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about the notable cast, okay? We're going to start with Milton, who is my favourite. He might be my favourite character from the show ever. I love him. He loves rocks. He is a rebel. He's banned from playing Pokemon in many a circle, and I do not know why, but I love it. He's the youngest person on the cast this year, and yet the most mature of all of them, and that is a feat. Well, it's not, because the rest of them are not really mature at all, but let's get into that. The next person we are introducing is Lydia. She is basically Milton's complete opposite. She is very emotional. She's very loud and a bit erratic. She's silly. The one thing she wants from a relationship is emotional maturity, she says, and yeah, she's not necessarily possessing of a bunch of that herself. Uche. I didn't like Uche from the start. I thought that he had a lot of red flags, a lot of narcissistic tendencies, just the way that he spoke down to people. He tried to appear calm in order to manipulate situations so that, you know, everybody would listen to him because he wasn't the erratic one. I thought that that was kind of his game from the beginning, and he didn't really do a lot to convince me otherwise over the course of the series. Aaliyah, she's pretty normal, she's pretty nice. Izzy, didn't like Izzy either. The girls loved him this season, he was a hot topic, but I just got a vibe from him. I promise it had more to do with the fact that he's going for the Andrew Tate look. But it was like fake woke. I feel like he virtue signaled a lot of feminist shit and didn't really follow up on being an upstanding feminist male at the end of the day. Stacey, very much her way is the right way and it is the only correct way to do things. For example, she and Izzy are speaking in the pods, and Izzy says that he would like to go deeper with her, he would like to get emotional because he feels like he's done that with the other girls that he's speaking to, but not with her. And Stacey basically turns around and says, I'm not that guy, that's not what you're going to be getting from me, and if you don't like that, then you're done. Concerning some other things, I can understand taking this approach where it's like, this is a fundamental part of my personality and you're going to have to get used to it, but if you're going to get married, you're going to have to get to a deep topic eventually. And I feel like this fun-loving attitude that she took in the beginning really hurt the relationship a lot. I feel like it made Izzy feel like he couldn't open up to her about these deeper things and get into these emotional situations with her, and that hurt them in the end. Not to say that it was all her fault, but here we are at the beginning. Johnny, hated by everyone this season, but I find her very sympathetic. I find her very misunderstood. I am in fact a Johnny apologist. Is this the return of Jessica? Is this her in spirit? Let's see. Chris, the nice guy of the season. I didn't like any of the boys except Milton this season. I immediately got bad vibes from all of them, including Chris, okay? He said one thing. He was like, oh, girls usually see me and they think I'm a fuckboy, so that doesn't usually go well for me. I don't know if this is like a no offense situation, but when I look at Chris, I do not see necessarily a fuckboy, right? And I don't feel like anybody was getting that vibe from him. The fact that he was like preempting himself with that, but the fact that he didn't want to be seen like that, it kind of made me think that he was secretly on the quiet a fuckboy. And you know, sometimes this vibe turns out to be right. I really thought I was wrong about Chris, but I was not. And there's Taylor. She's lovely. She's my favorite girl this season. And JP, who's quiet. He's very quiet. Let's get into the pods. So Uche immediately starts causing drama. He and Aaliyah are speaking. They seem to hit it off from the beginning. Aaliyah opens up to Uche and she admits that she cheated on a boyfriend. I think it was about 3 years ago. And Uche immediately starts in with the, oh, so you're a recent cheater. Out from the fact that he was obviously being very, he was speaking down to her in that moment, okay? He was obviously being very judgmental. I think it was hypocritical. He goes on immediately in that moment to say that he also cheated on a girlfriend when he was 18, but he put these stipulations on it like, oh, I was young and it was only a kiss. And it's like, there are levels to cheating. It's different in every relationship. Everybody has different boundaries. And so you're not allowed to say that what you did is any better or worse than what anybody else did. I think that's kind of up to your ex-partner to decide, if anyone. That's just my opinion. Anyway, not only is it hypocritical, but I also would like to posit that it doesn't matter, and it kind of comes back to what we were talking about with Paul and Amber earlier. Cheating, of course, people have reasons for doing it, and of course every relationship is different, and so it's impossible to know whether people would have that same response in a healthy relationship dynamic. Even if, like, people say once a cheater, always a cheater, right? But what if when you were young, your hormones are flying everywhere and you genuinely make a mistake? For example, like UJ did, he kissed somebody else, but then he finds it okay to forgive himself for that because of these stipulations. He did it once and he realized that it was a horrible thing to do. I think it's something that a lot of people don't want to admit, is that for a lot of people who do genuinely make a mistake and do something that betrays the trust of their partner, there's a lot of badness for them, okay, as well, like the guilt of it, the repercussions of it, should they choose to admit it, like breaking up families or just the relationship, making this other person hurt, right? It feels bad and it makes you feel like you're a bad person. A lot of people would say, yeah, okay, cool, well, you should feel like that. There's an ostracization, oh my god, I can't even say it, about like cheating, and I feel like, you know what I mean, like everybody has done something in their life where someone has gotten hurt. It's up to individuals whether they choose to move forward with them for that. The only person who can really forgive them for it is the person who they've done it to, right? That's how it works with any other victim, so why not? In this situation, why does the world get to judge cheaters, bro? I'm not defending them, I'm just playing devil's advocate as usual, okay? I am a college debate bro stuck in a 20-something-year-old woman's body. Izzy's speaking to 3 girls, and one of them is Johnny, and Johnny pretty much puts all of her eggs in Izzy's baskets straight away. Maybe there are a lot of reasons for this. Maybe Johnny's just a romantic bro, but I think that it has a lot to do with the fact that Johnny has often struggled with love, and I feel like she herself even admitted that she's used to coming second to addiction, and so it's possible that she used to love being hard. She's used to having to compete for love and for attention, and so the easy way that she sees with Chris, who she's also speaking to, who's clearly very interested in her and isn't speaking to anybody else, she doesn't feel like that's not the love that she recognizes. Okay, she only recognizes love that's hard. And Izzy, who's not giving her this full attention but who is also spouting all this woke feminist shit, seems like a good option to her, and also is like harder to get to. Okay, she has to work for it, and that's what she's used to. That's what love looks like to her. That's why she's so quick to fall for him, in my opinion. Izzy also performs the official Barnett bait and switch on Johnny, and he kind of implies to her that he wants to know that she's serious, and so obviously Johnny goes and breaks things off with Chris. Somebody else saying to you that they want to know that you're serious means that they're serious, bro. And so you're going to go out and you're going to do the things that you need to do to prove that you're serious, because that in itself is a commitment from that person. Okay, I don't want to hear anything different. It's the bait and switch, because then Johnny comes back and she's broken up with Chris, and Izzy turns around and he's like, oh, I'm gonna pick Stacey. And by the way, Izzy and Stacey are totally just a reincarnation of Amber and Barnett from the first season. Izzy does the bait and switch on Johnny, who is this season's Jess, and then he gets with Stacey, who is this season's Amber, because, like I said, the two of them are more of a fun-loving couple instead of a couple that gets deep and emotional together, and that's not the usual way that these things go, and it's unusual in that sense. There was also the issues with Amber and Barnett and money, and that's something that comes up with Izzy and Stacey later. However, this story, unlike Amber and Barnett, does not have a happy ending. Uche and Aaliyah made up, but it is not long before they have some more drama in the form of finding out that Uche and Lydia used to date outside of the pods. Turns out that the producers only let them continue if they didn't reveal things to everybody straight away. So that's the reason why Uche couldn't tell Aaliyah earlier. There is a lot of tension between Uche and Lydia later in the series, and basically it's a he said, she said, and he eventually goes with the narrative that she was a crazy obsessive stalker, and she says that he's a liar. First, they're really nice about each other though, and so I want to dive into the little narratives that they might have been telling each other, well, telling themselves in this situation, because I think it's really interesting. The clip of Uche and Lydia meeting in the pods for the first time, Lydia recognizes Uche's voice immediately. In fact, when she talks to Aaliyah about it later, she says that she recognizes his breathing, which is weird as fuck. Meanwhile, it takes Uche several minutes to recognize Lydia, even though she's got this really distinctive voice and accent. And you would think it would be really easy for him to recognize her straight away, but he clearly doesn't have any idea who this person is. And I think that reaction to each other really gives us an idea of who was in what kind of mindset, if you know what I mean. He also immediately jumped to, is this a sign that we should start over? And he was very hesitant about that, and it was him who put the brakes on it pretty immediately and said, no, I don't think that would be true to the experiment, which really felt like a polite way of turning her down, if I'm honest. It really didn't seem like Uche was interested in Lydia in this moment, and it seemed like Lydia, it was the moment when she was like, how are you going to feel if I get engaged to somebody else? Like, as if she was really convinced that Uche would be seriously jealous and mad if that happened. And he just didn't seem particularly arsed, to be honest. But did also say to Milton a little bit later on, remember, you don't have to propose to anybody. And Milton is the guy who Lydia eventually ended up speaking to after all of this drama. So I don't know whether that was protectiveness over Lydia or maybe protectiveness over Milton, because Lydia's a crazy stalker woman. I think that Uche made out like Lydia was a good person to Aaliyah at first, because he wanted to make himself look good by only relaying the good parts of the relationship. I think that anyone would do that in this situation, especially because Leah and Lydia had become very close over the course of time in the living quarters. So I think Uche probably thought it was his best interest to scope things out, see if Lydia had matured and changed since the last time they saw each other, and maybe everything could be swept under the rug and nobody would ever have to mention it again. However, that is not the way that things went, because Lydia was really weird about this. Like, even before this, when she found out that Aaliyah and Uche were speaking, she really wanted her and Aaliyah to be similar people. And I don't think they were very similar people at all. Like, they got on well and they were good friends. But Lydia's like this really loud and out there person, whereas Aaliyah seems like really down to earth and, you know, more quiet about things. This insistence from Lydia that the two of them were really similar was really odd before we knew that she dated Uche. But then after that, it was like, oh god, she wants them to be the same because she wants to believe in her mind, right, that Uche just chose her again in choosing Aaliyah, and that, you know, in another life her and Uche could still be together. That's the way it read to me. I'm sorry. Tea break. It's definitely time for a tea break. Happy Valentine's Day, by the way. So the couples have their reveals. They are Milton and Lydia, Izzy and Stacey, and Taylor and JP. Taylor and JP have kind of an awkward reveal. Like, JP isn't saying much, and I think because Taylor's nervous, she also runs out of things to say on this specific occasion. And it really sets a precedent for their relationship going forward that is not great. Taylor on the honeymoons tells JP that she actually cried after the reveal because she felt like he wasn't attracted to her. JP just doesn't reassure her in any kind of way. He doesn't tell her that he does find her attractive. He doesn't even go the other route of being like, oh, well, that was stupid for crying. You know what I mean? He doesn't give her anything. He just kind of is like, oh, that's sad. Massive red flag. And I mean, if it was me telling my partner that, it would definitely make me feel like I was onto something. So I can see why Taylor's attitude toward the relationship didn't improve after this. Well, the way that the editing is done in the honeymoon section is like really sly on Taylor and JP, to be honest, because all the rest of the couples are very physical with each other and very, very openly intimate. The way that the show is edited, it'll show you the other two couples hanging off each other and having a lot of fun and a laugh and a giggle, flirting, and then it'll cut to Taylor and JP, who are stuck in this awkward bubble of silence, and it really, really made me feel bad for the pair of them, to be honest, but mostly Taylor, because I think that seeing the other couples in these normal situations in their new relationships and not being able to help herself from comparing where she and her boyfriend or fiance were at in that particular instance, I can see why it just didn't help the situation very much. I really thought that JP was just, and this is no slight on him, like, he was very quiet, so you just kind of had to, you couldn't get a real read on him from what he was saying, you just had to kind of assume. Considering he went through with the proposal and after the reveal and everything, I thought that maybe JP just wasn't the brightest bulb in the box, you know what I mean? Because I've been out with some dumb guys in my time and they're just not talkers, bro. Some of them just aren't like that. That's not the way that they express themselves, okay? And that's fine. You can put up with it and you're not the kind of person who needs that validation in a relationship, then it's fine, okay? Some people just aren't suited because of the way that they are, okay? But Taylor and JP were one of those couples who hit it off immediately in the pods, and we all just assumed they were going to be like a Brett and Tiff. There's always one couple that clicks a little bit earlier than the rest, they get engaged a little bit earlier than the rest, and they kind of just sail through the competition. That's the reason why we all think Love is Blind is still going, right? Because they have the occasional case that works. We all assumed that Taylor and JP were going to be that, but then they just couldn't get past this awkward first meeting, and every time Taylor would try to converse with JP, he would like mentally block her from having that conversation. I thought he was just dumb. I thought he just wasn't good at conversation or showing affection. Like, we've all been with someone who's not the most physically affectionate and who, when the two of you are like out in public and stuff, it's kind of just more like you are friends. In fact, sometimes even when you hang out alone, it can seem like you're more like friends, and that can be frustrating for some people. Like I said, some people just need that physical validation in the relationship. Some people's love language is physical touch, however you want to phrase it. Some people just aren't suited in the initial way that they handle a relationship. I thought that Taylor was going to have to decide if she could deal with JP and the way that he does express his love, or if she was going to leave this relationship and pursue one where maybe the person had a love language that she understood and could reciprocate. Or conversely, JP could also try a little bit harder to be a conversationalist and to try and give Taylor that validation if the pair of them really wanted to make it work. You know, the pair of them could tone it down on either end. However, then Taylor and JP have the final confrontation, right? And it all comes out. And I'm not sure if this is explicitly what JP's only problem, okay, but this is the only one he posits to us, and it is fucking wild, so let's go. JP says that when Taylor first came out for the reveal, she was wearing a lot of makeup, and that made him think she was fake. Now, I can understand if this was the first time JP had ever come across Taylor in the wild, and he looked at her and judged her based on physical appearance, and said, oh, she's not my kind of girl, she's wearing too much makeup, and I find that girls who wear a lot of makeup are fake people, so I'm not going to approach her. The fact of the matter is, JP, mate, you're on Love is Blind, which is about not judging people based on their appearances. And furthermore, you've already gotten to know Taylor to the point that you were willing to propose to her. You know the insides of this girl before you've ever seen the outside. So why would seeing the outside now retroactively make you believe that she's a fake person, that the person that she's presented to you on the other side of this wall that has nothing to do with her appearance is fake? It doesn't logically make sense, okay? And I feel like this was, in part, obviously he did have a problem with the makeup. The way that he talked about it was very disparaging and very misogynistic, okay? But that's not what we're talking about today. We're talking about the fact that I think JP used this one facet of his issue to cover for whatever the real issue was. And I just really can't say what that might be, because like I said, I genuinely thought that JP was trying, bro, but I just really don't think he was after this conversation. And obviously, I think that any girl in this situation would get really offended. Taylor does that. She spends the night out of the room, and in the morning, she's already thought it over and she decides to end the relationship. And it's weird because JP kind of seems a little bit upset about it. Even the day before, he was saying things like, I don't want to lose you, and things like that. But there was just no level of effort that we could see coming from this man, okay? It seems like he was really, really awkward, but then I would posit the question why he thought he could do a dating TV show if he was this awkward of a guy. I don't know, I literally, JP, what is going on, dude? I did think it was really interesting after watching this argument though, thinking back to when they were on the beach. Taylor tried to make the point of the fact that they weren't in the police, the other couples were, and JP kind of flew off the handle a little bit. Like, he didn't yell or anything, but you could tell that he got really annoyed. And it was, immediately he was like, why'd you care so much? What do the people think? And you could tell that, even though that's not what Taylor was saying, like, she didn't care what the other couples thought, she just was comparing where their relationship was at compared to the others, which is like, obviously you're on your honeymoon, you should be in this honeymoon stage, bro. Like, she has got a little bit of a point. JP took it as she was really concerned about the thoughts of people, and this was, it's him like constructing this image of her that she's fake and she's this person who bases her personality of what she thinks the people around her want. If I was to posit a guess at anything that was factoring into why JP was being such a weirdo, bro, it's probably because once he got this look at her and he decided in his head that she was fake, all of these little things would like add up for him about like, oh, well, she does this, so that means she's also fake. This could be interpreted to fit the narrative that I have put onto Taylor, right? I'm not saying that he did this on purpose, but like, obviously his brain was in this negative feedback loop about Taylor at this point, and I just think there was no saving the relationship. And so the series goes on to only have two couples, which is crazy. Izzy and Lydia had a thing in the pods when all of the couples eventually meet up at the resort. Izzy takes Lydia aside and he, you know, talks to her about their breakup to try and get like closure or whatever. I did not believe that this was for closure. I thought that, obviously we know that the producers kind of probably encouraged the two of them to talk, but the way that Izzy held the conversation, aside from the fact that he was horrifically drunk, it really just seemed like he was there to kind of fuel his ego and kind of rehash the breakup and get high off that ego trip of rejecting the girl again. And I really appreciated in that moment that Lydia had completely moved on from Izzy, like she didn't care anymore. When she first got into the pod, she obviously wanted to date Uche. She moved on to Izzy and she was like really quick to fall in with Izzy, and Izzy kind of rejected her. And then after that, didn't she speak to somebody else as well, or am I making that up? But anyway, she ended up with Milton at the end, and it's like, I do think they're actually a really cute couple in a lot of ways, and I'm really happy for them. But yeah, that just kind of gives you a little look into Lydia's mindset, but she switched around a lot is what I'm saying. And so by the time that she's engaged to Milton and Izzy tries to have this conversation with her, she's just so over it. She's like, yeah, I was over you in the pods, bro. We don't have to have this conversation. Again, this little hint that Izzy was not quite the woke Sigma male that he thinks he is. Izzy is, of course, with Stacey, and Stacey, I actually started the series thinking that she was a little bit like Chelsea from last season, and that she was this like really down-to-earth, fun-loving girl who was just nice, bro. And then she started with all this shit, and I was like, whoa, where has all this stuff come from? For example, Stacey is kind of rich, bro. She's kind of stacking, you know what I mean? She's talking about how this house that she lives in takes a lot of maintenance. They're not gonna go and move into Izzy's flat, right, when she's got this big house that she's been working on making perfect for herself. So Izzy's gonna move into this house, and she says, oh, one day I could randomly get a massive bill for like thousands and thousands of pounds. I have to just pay it up front. So is that something that you'll be willing to split with me where you live here? And Izzy looks like really reticent about this, but he does agree. I think that depending on how long he has been there and how long the relationship has been established, I think that the amount can higher. And obviously it's up to them two in the end. But I just thought it was a little bit cheeky. It was a bit cheeky, bro. It was cheeky. It was even more cheeky when she then went on to say, what about dinner? And Izzy said, oh yeah, we'll split that too, which is obviously what he thought she wanted him to say, because Stacey gives off this strong independent woman vibe, right? And she already was talking about splitting her house bills, so it is only fair that they should split dinner bills or takeout bills, etc. But then Stacey kind of gets one on it and is like, no, like the man always pays for dinner. And Izzy of course takes offense to this, because it's like, well, you want me to pay for your house that I've not lived in yet, and all of your dinners that we have together for the foreseeable future until death do us part. It's just a little bit hypocritical and sexist, isn't it? I'm just saying. She obviously advertised the fact that she wanted a man who could look after himself in the money department. This isn't Izzy looking after himself, this is Izzy looking after you, bro, and that's a whole different ballpark. I don't even think she wants to be like a stay-at-home mum and be completely like doted on and shit. So it's just weird that she's got these weird little principles when it comes to money and what the man should pay for, just to kind of prove himself to her in a way. It's a little bit toxic, bro, and it goes on to be even more toxic when they go to Izzy's flat and she starts to like get a bee in her bonnet, bro, about the fact that he's got paper plates and cups. A little bit immature, I think we can all agree on that, but then again, it's practical, I guess. It saves time. I wouldn't personally mind it, especially as he's like a guy living on his own. I would probably get annoyed washing one plate and one spoon for every meal, you know what I mean? And waiting for the dishes to build up over a course of days isn't really an option, because then you're gonna get flies. So really, the paper plates are kind of a good shout, especially when you probably consider he was getting takeout most nights anyways, so he probably didn't need a plate a lot of the time. With the plates, you could cover them in cling film every time you use them, and then you could just wrap the food up in the cling film and throw the cling film away, and the plate's still clean. So Izzy, hit me up, I've got more life hacks for you. She kind of gets really offended by the fact that he has paper plates, and she gets really stuck on the fact that if he would have invited her around for dinner, like in the real world, and they haven't met on Love is Blind, that he might have cooked her a meal on these paper plates and not made this effort for her, I guess. Do you want to see the authentic side of Izzy, or do you want him to now completely change his personality because he's your fiance? Because that's kind of how it feels. And she's very, like I said at the beginning, she's very stubborn, and she doesn't want to see Izzy's side of things, and in fact she talks over him so much and ends up walking off on him when he asks her to stop interrupting her, very politely, I might add. Izzy also has in his room what he calls the lost and found, which is a collection of junk that random one-night stands have left at his house over the course of the years. Also kind of immature, also a little bit like douchebaggy and footboyish. I do understand that, but it is just kind of something that happens. And you know what boys are like, they never want to throw anything away, they think that things are useful. If anybody else comes around to the house and they're like, oh, I haven't got a bobble, or I haven't got a hairpin, or I haven't got this specific colour of eyeshadow, he probably opens up the lost and found drawer and is like, will any of this help? But if you're not like super uber jealous, which I'm gonna say right now, I think that Stacey, even though she insists she's not, I think that she is. I think that unless you're uber jealous, this is not something that would bother you, and is actually something that I would find really useful, although I would throw out all of the like useless items and all of the other people's clothes, you know, and I would just keep the things that were, you know, useful to me or to have around the house. Something interesting that Stacey also said was that she throws out pictures of all of her exes, you know, once they split up or once she gets into a new relationship. This is something that I'm aware a lot of people do, and it's really interesting to me personally, because for me, it's like, that's a memory, bro, that you created. I know that maybe things didn't end well with you and this person, or maybe you don't want your new relationship to come across these pictures. Every memory is like golden and important, right, bro? Like, I don't want to get rid of any of those. I keep pictures of flies on the Jello mate, you know what I mean? I can't be getting rid of pictures of people that I purported to love. I think it's really weird. And I think in Stacey's case, not necessarily in everyone's case, it definitely adds up to this idea of jealousy. Because she is a jealous person, she doesn't want to incite the jealousy of her lovers, right? And so she gets rid of all the things that would cause that distress for another person, which, when you think about it, because she would react that way, it's a really nice thing to do. Again, it's this case of like Stacey thinking that her way is the right way, and the fact that Izzy didn't, you know, afford her this same courtesy of getting rid of all these other girls' things and of hiding this this little like fuckboyish part of himself from her. I feel like he's disrespected her in that way. Whereas from Izzy's side, and I can fully see where he's coming from with this, he thinks that he's showing her his authentic self. He's showing her who he was before she got with him. And really, I think it is more helpful for Stacey to know that he is the kind of guy who keeps souvenirs from the girls he shagged. He's kind of got a Joe Goldberg thing going on, and bro, that is an important thing to know about a guy, right? Like that says something big about his personality, and I would appreciate knowing that about my man more than him trying to hide that facet of himself from me, because that's directly linked to our relationship. Like, I am the girl that he's sleeping with now. So do you want to put my underwear in a box or not? So everything in this season that is worth mentioning basically went down at this one party where they invited back a lot of the cast from the beginning of the show. Even ones that apparently didn't end up getting coupled up. At this party, Izzy inserts himself into Chris's relationship. He and Johnny actually heard each other's voices at the airport and knew that it was each other straight away, and I think that's romantic as hell. And so he and Johnny ended up rekindling this relationship that they had in the pods. Johnny actually like cries on camera and says that she's really, really sorry for picking Chris second, and that she's gonna like spend her whole life making it up to him because he's like the nicest guy, and it's just fucking super sweet. And Johnny takes a reel in at this party as well, and Chris is really nice to her, so that's nice. They really seem to have a really good relationship, even in the reunion when, surprise, surprise, it didn't last. And I will go into why, I will. And then they seem to have a really good relationship and to really care about each other, so that was nice. It was just nice to see a couple who genuinely seem to have each other's back in this fucking season, bro. Because usually it's all about still speaking to the person that you were speaking to in pods even though you're engaged now. So Izzy comes over and he's not happy that Chris and Johnny are back together. Oh, Kath. Hi, Kat. Look at that boy. He's not happy that Chris and Johnny are back together. Let's speculate about why. Obviously, Izzy was going to choose Johnny up until a certain point, and I feel like he sabotaged Johnny's chances with Chris because he didn't want her to be with anybody else. That's what I genuinely think. And I think that when he saw that Chris and Johnny had got together, his ego was hurt by that, and I think that he wanted to come between them by playing the part of the concerned friend. But this makes me very angry because he comes up to Chris and he's like trying to restart this drama about, apparently she said opposite things to both of them. When you play it back to back, I can see how people would interpret it that way, but that's not the way that I personally thought what she was saying, and so I find it hard to see it from that perspective. At this point, if he's really playing the part of the concerned friend, then he just needs to back off and give it up, because Chris already knew of this situation. Like, this situation was hashed out in the pods, and that's why he walked away from Johnny. And if he's chosen to go back to Johnny after fully knowing the circumstances and making his adult-oriented decision, Izzy hasn't got a say in that anymore. Like, he's just rehashing old drama that Chris has already made his decision on and moved past from. And so it's very obvious to see that Izzy is the one with the problem here. You can just tell it doesn't stem from a place of good faith because it ends up in a massive argument. Izzy and Stacey all of a sudden hate Johnny now, which is weird because obviously Izzy was going to choose her, so you would think that he would still have some modicum of care for her. But I think that's part of the issue, really. I think that Izzy and Stacey are both very aware that Izzy still has feelings for Johnny, that he's jealous of her relationship with Chris, and this is causing a lot of tension. And Stacey can blame it on the fact that she said Johnny was being bitchy in the pods, but the fact of the matter is that the two of you are the ones who are being very hostile, inserting yourselves into the other's relationship. Like, Johnny is living in these people's heads rent-free. Like, they're constantly arguing about her when she's not there. Clearly, there is some underlying issue here that has nothing to do with Johnny's attitude, because Johnny's attitude has not been an issue since the pods, and you haven't even seen her since then, bro. For some reason, y'all are both just, like, really fucking incensed by the sight of her. It's like, leave the girl alone. Johnny has been villainized this season, okay? I'm gonna say it. She is the new Jessica, and I'm here to be a Johnny apologist. Even if she did say opposite things to these two guys, I'm here to lay it out to you. Can you not follow two patterns in life? We all do this, okay? This is a phenomenon that I've observed in life, and that is that in relationships, we tend to overcompensate. So you'll get into a relationship, it'll be going well for a while, and then you'll start to notice the cracks. And there will be one or two essential things about this other person that make it so that this relationship isn't going to work. And I think that in your next relationship, though you may not mean to, a lot of us overcompensate for those issues and we pick someone who's kind of the polar opposite in those regards. Whereas what we probably need is a happy medium between the two. We springboard between two polar opposite kinds of people. I do it myself. It's a troubled, pale Victorian child of a man, and then the oversensitive, overprotective kind of dad figure on the other side, right? So it's like, here's me looking after this person, and then I'm like, oh, I need a real man. I need to not have to look after the person that I am with. And so I end up overcompensating and getting with someone who wants to look after me, bro. And then I'm like, get away from me, you're not my dad. It's something that a lot of us, if not all of us, do. It's something that I've noticed in my personal life. It's something I've noticed my friends do. And it's something that I fully believe that Johnny has been doing. She gets with these guys who are a lot of trouble, who are drug addicted, bro. And then after that, she's like, I need to get away from these people who are clearly trouble for me and get with a guy who's good for me. And she maybe necessarily doesn't choose a guy who she actually cares for. She chooses a guy who is practical. This is what I understood from what Johnny was saying. You know, Izzy didn't take it that way, and Izzy got really offended by it and was like, Johnny's a liar. But it didn't stop him from necking on with her after the show ended, did it? So how much truth was there really to how pissed off he was? I ask you. Izzy also brought up the fact that Johnny said I love you to him in the pods. I'm not okay with it because we very obviously saw her say it on the first date to him, and it was flippantly. You know, when I do this as well, when somebody really makes me laugh, I'm like, oh, I love you. You know what I mean? And that was very clearly the way that Johnny said it, and it's very clearly something that is just kind of in her vocabulary. I think it was more weird the fact that Izzy was like, oh, she said she loved me 4 times. She said it 4 times, bro. And it's like, why were you counting? Why do you think that that's like a relevant thing to bring up in this conversation that doesn't make you sound like a 3-year-old? It just really sounded like he was trying to get one over on Johnny here. And like I said, I think we can all acknowledge that she said that flippantly and that it was weird that he was so caught up on this point. Izzy really let himself down here. I knew I was onto him. When he gets home and he and Stacey start to have this argument because Stacey's obviously very jealous that Izzy is still very obviously involved in Johnny's relationship with Chris. Izzy comes out and he's like, bro, when you were shouting at that other girl and making that other girl feel like shit, I was so turned on. Like, the man really claims to be some kind of like woke feminist and then says shit like that, and it just really boils my piss, bro. It really just, it's disgusting. It makes my skin crawl. Luckily, I thought that Stacey might be like receptive to this, but luckily, like, she shuts that down and she's like, bro, like, I don't want you to compare me to other girls and that be the way that you get your rocks off, bro. Also at the party, Uche and Lydia meet up for the first time since the pods, and they end up having a fight. This is when Uche has switched the narrative. Lydia was getting on at Aaliyah, right? After Aaliyah found out that the two of them used to date, Lydia just constantly was telling her all this information about Uche that she didn't ask for, and she does tell her to stop several times, and she just won't. Lydia is clearly a very clueless person, okay? Like, social cues are not her thing. She was excited, she wanted to share things with her friend, and also, like I said, she is kind of still obsessed with Uche at that time. So it comes across very weird, and I can see why it was a lot for Aaliyah, and Aaliyah decided to run out on Uche and, like, leave the show without telling him. Uche turns up to this party, right? Aaliyah doesn't come. Uche asks Lydia, can you talk to him? And he like confronts her about the end of their relationship. And he says, oh, you were like stalking me and you were like looking up the girls that I was speaking to on Instagram and just like keeping tabs on me and stuff. And it was really weird. And Lydia doesn't engage. She doesn't take it on. The only thing that we really find out from Lydia is that she believed that Uche was cheating on her. But as we find out from the both of them, there was a point in their relationship when commitment, as we shall put it, was murky. If him speaking to other girls took place in this kind of middle area where they weren't really dating, but they hadn't stopped seeing each other yet, maybe Lydia would have seen that as cheating and Uche would have seen that as just him casually dating Lydia. And so that might have just been like a miscommunication for the pair of them and not necessarily Uche all out cheating, right? And I'm not trying to be on his side. As usual, devil's advocate, college bro, you know me. Lydia walks off. And, you know, she doesn't ever take responsibility. I think that Lydia thinks that she's emotionally mature because she's very in touch with her emotions and she's not afraid to express them. The difference, you know, like, I sometimes I could just punch someone in the fucking face, bro, like, you know, and that would be me expressing my emotions. But that is not a healthy and adult way to express your emotion. Lydia needs to learn that having emotional maturity means that you're able to handle your own emotions and not just fly off the handle every time you get a little bit upset. Milton comes and saves the day, of course he does, he's my fucking hero. And the bit where he holds her head in his hands and tells her to calm down and says, we have a dinner to go to, bro, it makes me cry. I need a man like Milton in my life. And he's fucking married, so where does this leave me? The weddings. Izzy and Stacey fight over money right beforehand. All of us knew this was coming. He told Johnny in the pods that he either was in debt or had been in debt, and never told Stacey about this, despite her sitting him down at her kitchen table and saying, are there any issues with money that I should know about? Kept this from her until the last minute, and obviously that's not a good sign, and it wasn't as big of a deal as everybody was making out. Like, it was just that he used to be in debt, he wasn't even in debt anymore. It really wasn't as big of a deal as everybody was making out, but obviously the principle of the thing, the lies, it was too much right before the wedding, and they decided not to continue. Interesting that he found it comfortable enough to open up to Johnny and not Stacey about this. I think, you know, that kind of class divide thing with Zach and Blaze kind of comes into this again. And it makes me wonder if maybe Izzy and Johnny were the right choice from the beginning. I think that Izzy wanted to prove that he'd come far enough in life that he was worthy of a girl like Stacey, who come from status or money or whatever. Kind of achieved everything else when he'd come from a low point, and he felt like he needed to bag this wealthy woman in order to prove himself in another way. And I'm not to say that he didn't care about Stacey on that level, but I feel like there was this element of proving himself to their relationship. I think it was sexist again after rejection, and talks about how she's going to be like an old maid with no husband because she's too picky. Lydia and Milton get married, and I think that whoever Lydia ended up with, as long as they were willing enough, it would have gone right with them, because like I said, Lydia flip-switched between a few men in the pods. I think that Lydia is one of those people who just wants love so badly. It's a little bit like Chelsea, but with a little bit more desperation thrown in there, and I don't mean to sound terrible, it's just, this is the way I'm reading it. Lydia wanted so badly love and marriage and for it to work with someone that it would have worked for her with anyone. Like, any one of the men that she would have ended up with, she would have made it work, bro, because she just wanted it that bad, and she's making that choice to love that person every day and to be in that relationship with that person. That's why she wasn't asked about Izzy when he eventually came to speak to her and she was already with Milton. Like, she's dead set on Milton now because this is the man that wants her back. And to her, that's everything. And you know what? For her, Mr. Paul from last season, Mr. Libra Riz, love is enough. And I think that's fucking gorgeous. Like, go Lydia, if love is enough for you, delete it. I'm going to talk about the reunion for this one because the reunion was spicy this year. So Izzy and Johnny saw each other at a bar and they ended up making out, and I thought it was interesting because, you know, apparently Izzy thought Johnny was this terrible person and he's glad that he didn't choose her. As soon as Stacey rejected him, then all of a sudden he's necking on with her in his car. I think it proves my opinion that he never stopped having feelings for Johnny. It speaks a lot to Johnny's sense of self-worth that she went there after some of the things that he said. Think of that what you will. Interesting that some people, when they like a person, will perform hatred just as a way of denying it, and that's what makes it so obvious that they like them. And then, of course, there's Chris, who, if you remember, gave me a fuckboyish red flag in his intro sequence and cheated on Johnny. He ghosted her, and then she found out that he was seeing another girl, and he just never bothered telling her. So, fuck you, Chris. You're not a nice guy. In conclusion, there's barely anyone on recent seasons who I would say that is ready to get married. I think it's becoming more and more like a clout thing, and that's just something that's unavoidable as the show gets run into the ground. We've had some of the worst couples on the last couple of seasons. Even the couples that are good together don't last, because I think that the formula of the show is just like, why do you have to get married, bro? Like, why is that a step that we have to take? Everyone's just going to end up coming to the conclusion that it's too soon enough, and then we're not going to have a show anymore. As usual, we ask the eternal question, is love blind? It is in a lot of ways, okay? Paul and Micah are an example of two people that I don't think would have ever gotten together if it hadn't been for this experiment. And I think that they were obviously very well suited to each other, but their lifestyles were so different, and the type of people that they expected for themselves were not each other. In the way that the show is trying to prove it, sure, love's blind in that way. She's also blind in other ways. Like, for example, Lydia, you know, she is blinded to anything that any man can throw at her because she is so desperate to love and to be loved that she'll take anything. No, it sounds awful when I say it like that. She luckily found a man who would not take advantage of this. Her and Milton seem really suited to each other, and I love that they're happily married. Is that love, or is that just the idea of love? I don't know. I'm not the man to answer this question, but may I leave you with the idea of Irina and Zach? Do you know what? Physical attraction, it's important, okay? As much as this show is trying to prove that you can love someone without knowing what they look like and without their looks mattering, I think that cases like Irina and Zach, they really prove that it does matter. And if you don't have like the tiniest modicum of physical attraction for this person, I just don't think it's going to work for a lot of people. I think that's just kind of normal. I don't think that means that we're all shallow, horrible people. I just think like everybody's got a type, right? Some people like ugly dudes, bro. Like, what are you talking about? I think I'm tired. That's the conclusion that I've come to. And I'm going to leave it because God knows how long this is going to be. And good night. Happy Valentine's Day. See you next week, bro. Promise this time.